Tonight, a special report on carbon footprint in the world of international logistics.
Hello there. Welcome to Arkansas Worldwide Global News. I'm your host, Brandon Ledbetter. On tonight's show, we will be discussing carbon footprint. What is carbon footprint? How are carbon emissions affecting international trade and logistics? What are current companies doing to stay competitive and efficient? How is this going to affect business in the future? All of that and more on tonight's special. This is Arkansas Worldwide Global News. Now to Austin Strickland with more on what carbon footprint is. Austin?
Hello, Brandon. I am on location in Portage, Alaska, where a glacier has been melting for some time now. In the context of international logistics, carbon footprint is the amount of greenhouse gases a company emits throughout its supply chain. It is measured in tons of CO2. It is released mainly by deforestation and burning of fossil fuels, as well as volcanic eruptions and human respiration. The following graphics show how CO2 measurements have increased dramatically over the past century. Back to you, Brandon.
Wow, that's some hot reporting. Thank you for sharing that with us, Austin. Now that we know the importance of carbon footprint, let's go to Reese Follis to get a perspective on how international logistics affects carbon footprint. Hi, Reese.
Hi, Brandon. I'm standing here in front of the Panama Canal, and I'm going to quickly explain all the different modes of transportation that are affecting international carbon footprint output. From the World Report in 2010, you can see, on average, motor carriers emit 79% of total emissions. Air carriers emit 13% of total emissions. Water carriers emit 7% of total emissions, and rail transportation emits the remaining 1% of total emissions. Outsourcing greatly affects transportation and carbon emissions, and what I mean by this is that the low-cost sourcing of labor, components, and material from other countries results in longer supply chains. More miles equals more carbon emissions. The benefits of international logistics results in more transportation distance, which results in more carbon emissions. Carbon emissions are significantly impacted by longer distances. We also have to consider the total carbon emissions that go into sourcing raw materials and manufacturing products. So why are companies looking to reduce carbon footprint? Well, the benefits of reducing their carbon footprint includes avoiding government-regulated fines and cleanup costs, cutting costs including energy and transportation costs, investing in green technologies that will benefit future growth, and staying competitive with the ever-increasing demand for green products. Now back to you, Brandon.
Thanks, Reese.
That's some good reporting. Now, to explain what current companies are actually doing to reduce their carbon footprint, I'll send you now to Devin Dunaway, who is in front of Dell Corporation in Round Rock, Texas. Hi, Devin.
Hey Brandon, I'm standing here in front of Dell Incorporated and I just spoke with some Dell representatives so they could explain to me what they are doing to reduce their carbon footprint. Many companies are focusing inward by upgrading offices to energy-efficient appliances and installing solar panels and are neglecting the emissions of their supply chain where most of the carbon is emitted. However, Dell is working with more than 100 of its top manufacturing suppliers to cut fuel and electricity use, adopt new renewable energy, and track carbon output. The company says the effort is part of Dell's broader mandate to slash inefficiencies in its supply chain and curb unnecessary costs. Speaking of the supply chain, the Dell representatives told me about a recent study conducted by 75 multinational companies that shows that 50% of supply chain companies are not actively addressing the climate change issues. They do not have a plan to reduce carbon emissions. Now, back to you, Brandon.
Thank you for investigating that for us, Devin. Very intriguing. Now, here's Austin to speculate about the future of business and carbon footprint.
In order to see the future of carbon footprint and logistics, let's take a look at how low-cost sourcing affects carbon footprint. Low-cost sourcing is one of the benefits of doing international business. However, more international sourcing results in more carbon emissions. For example, low-cost sourcing in third world countries may result in more carbon emissions due to less stringent environmental regulations. Also, longer transportation distances to take advantage of lower costs results in more carbon emissions from fuel. There is a trade-off between low-cost sourcing and tangible and intangible costs to the business. These trade-offs are causing businesses to consider nearshoring facilities from faraway places to closer to the home office. Shorter transportation distances means less carbon emissions. In the future, we expect an increase in the importance of the carbon trading market as more and more carbon regulations are put in place. Here's a video explaining how carbon credits work.
184 countries have agreed to reduce their pollution over time. This is where carbon credits come in. Governments create limits on how much pollution companies can make every year by issuing them carbon credits. One carbon credit allows a company to produce 1 ton of pollution per year. Cleaner companies sell the carbon credits they don't use to companies that pollute too much. If a company doesn't have enough carbon credits, then they pay a big fine to the government. Over time, less credits are issued by governments, making polluting more expensive and rewarding companies that produce less pollution or ones that figure out ways to get rid of it. This system results in less total pollution being produced every year.
In summary, as carbon regulations increase, engaging in international logistics may not be as attractive as certain cases. Also, companies may become more creative with their carbon credit strategy. Back to you, Brandon.
Thank you for joining us tonight for this special report on carbon footprint in international logistics. To recap, we learned about the importance of carbon footprint and the climate change challenges we face as a society. We saw how international logistics is a major contributor to carbon emissions. We learned what major companies are doing to reduce emissions. And finally, we took a look into the future of business and carbon footprint. On behalf of the entire Arkansas Worldwide Global News team, I'm Brandon Ledbetter. Stay classy, everyone.